What if everything you've been taught about productivity is designed to keep you busy rather than effective, distracted rather than accomplished, working rather than creating? Today we're going to explore the underground philosophy of extreme productivity, not the surface-level tactics and time management systems that dominate the self-help world, but the deeper principles that actually govern high-level human performance. These are insights that most productivity gurus won't share because they challenge the entire industry built around keeping you perpetually optimizing rather than actually achieving. The truth is that extreme productivity isn't about efficiency, it's about effectiveness. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what matters. And it's certainly not about following someone else's system. It's about understanding your own consciousness well enough to work with its natural patterns rather than against them. This understanding requires us to examine three philosophical foundations that separate those who achieve extraordinary results from those who remain perpetually busy. The principle of essential versus urgent, the paradox of productive rest, and what I call the energy architecture of meaning. Let me illustrate this through someone I'll call Elena, a research scientist who spent 5 years trapped in what she called productivity theater, looking incredibly busy while accomplishing remarkably little. Elena tried every system imaginable. Getting things done, time blocking, the Eisenhower matrix, elaborate morning routines, productivity apps that tracked every minute of her day. She was more organized than ever, but somehow less productive than when she'd started. The breakthrough came when Elena realized she was treating productivity as a mechanical problem when it's actually a philosophical one. She wasn't just trying to manage her time better, she was trying to figure out how to live meaningfully in a world designed to scatter her attention across 1,000 urgent but ultimately insignificant tasks. The first underground secret of extreme productivity is understanding the profound difference between what's essential and what's urgent. This sounds simple, but it requires a level of philosophical clarity that most people never develop. Urgent tasks scream for attention. They create stress, demand immediate response, and generate a false sense of importance through their emotional intensity. Essential tasks, on the other hand, often whisper. They're the activities that align with your deepest values, contribute to long-term goals, and create meaning rather than just movement. Elena discovered that she'd been living in what the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard called the aesthetic stage of existence, constantly reacting to immediate pleasures and pains rather than making conscious choices based on deeper principles. Her entire productivity system was optimized for responding to urgency rather than identifying and pursuing what was truly essential. Here's the philosophical insight that changed everything for Elena. Urgency is often other people's priorities disguised as your own emergencies. When you respond immediately to every urgent request, every notification, every crisis, you're not being productive. You're being reactive. You're letting external circumstances and other people's agendas determine how you spend your consciousness. The shift from reactive to essential thinking requires what I call existential courage, the willingness to disappoint people in the short term in order to honor your deeper commitments in the long term. This isn't about being selfish or irresponsible. It's about recognizing that you can't contribute your unique gifts to the world if you're constantly responding to everyone else's demands for your attention. Elena started each week by asking herself a question that the Stoic philosophers would recognize. If I could only accomplish 3 things this week, what would they be? Not 3 categories of things, not 3 types of activities, but 3 specific outcomes that would genuinely matter 6 months from now. Then she built her entire schedule around protecting time for these essential activities, treating everything else as negotiable. This wasn't easy. It required her to have difficult conversations with colleagues, to say no to requests that seemed important, and to resist the addictive feeling of being needed by everyone all the time. But the results were extraordinary. Within 3 months, Elena had made more progress on her research than she had in the previous year and a half. More importantly, she felt more aligned with her own values and more energized by her work than she had since graduate school. The second underground secret challenges one of the most toxic assumptions in modern productivity culture: the idea that more effort automatically leads to better results. This brings us to what I call the paradox of productive rest. Most productivity systems treat rest as the absence of work, a necessary evil that interrupts our real purpose of getting things done. But the most productive people in history understood something that neuroscience is only beginning to confirm. Rest isn't the opposite of productivity, it's an essential component of it. Consider the philosophical implications of this. If your mind is like a soil that grows ideas, then constant activity is like never letting the soil rest between seasons. Eventually, it becomes depleted, unable to support the kind of deep, creative thinking that produces breakthrough results. Elena discovered this when she started paying attention to when her best ideas actually occurred. They didn't come during her most intense work sessions or her most organized planning periods. They emerged during walks, in the shower, while doing mundane household tasks, moments when her conscious mind relaxed enough for her unconscious processing to surface. This led her to a profound realization. She wasn't just working too much, she was thinking too much. Her mind never had the space to integrate information, make unexpected connections, or access the kind of intuitive insights that can only emerge from a relaxed, receptive state of consciousness. The ancient Greeks had a concept called otium, productive leisure, that creates the conditions for wisdom and creativity to emerge. This wasn't laziness or entertainment. It was purposeful non-doing that allowed the mind to reorganize itself at deeper levels. Elena began building what she called integration time into her schedule. These weren't breaks from work, they were a different kind of work. She would take long walks without podcasts or music, allowing her mind to wander freely. She would spend time in nature without any agenda except to be present. She would engage in simple, repetitive activities that occupied her hands while freeing her mind to make connections. The results were remarkable. Not only did her creativity increase, but her ability to solve complex problems improved dramatically. Solutions that had eluded her during intense focus sessions would suddenly become obvious during these periods of productive rest. This brings us to the third underground secret: understanding what I call the energy architecture of meaning. Most productivity systems treat energy like a fuel tank, something that gets depleted through use and needs to be refilled through rest. But this mechanical metaphor misses something crucial about human psychology. There are activities that drain your energy and activities that create energy. The difference isn't based on physical effort or mental complexity, it's based on meaning. When you're engaged in work that aligns with your deepest values and utilizes your unique strengths, you can work for hours without feeling depleted. When you're doing work that feels meaningless or conflicts with your values, even simple tasks become exhausting. Elena realized that much of her previous productivity struggles came from trying to optimize systems for work that wasn't inherently energizing. She was trying to force herself to be efficient at activities that were draining her soul, when what she really needed was to restructure her work around activities that naturally energized her. This required a level of self-knowledge that goes far beyond typical productivity advice. Elena had to understand not just what she was good at, but what kinds of activities made her feel more alive rather than more depleted. She had to identify not just her skills, but her sources of meaning. She discovered that detailed analysis energized her, but administrative tasks drained her. Collaborative problem-solving gave her energy, but routine data entry left her feeling empty. Once she understood her own energy architecture, she could design her days to maximize energizing activities and minimize depleting ones. This didn't mean she never did tasks that drained her. That's not realistic for most people. But she became strategic about when and how she approached these activities. She batched depleting tasks together so she could recover fully, rather than sprinkling them throughout her day. She found ways to connect even mundane activities to her larger sense of purpose. Here's something most people don't realize. The most productive people in any field share certain philosophical approaches that they rarely discuss publicly. They understand that extreme productivity isn't about individual optimization. It's about creating what I call meaning ecosystems around themselves. Elena discovered this when she started studying how her most accomplished colleagues actually worked, not how they said they worked. What she found challenged everything she thought she knew about high performance. The most productive researchers weren't working longer hours, they were working more intentionally. They weren't using more sophisticated systems, they were asking better questions. They weren't more disciplined, they were more aligned. They had developed what the philosopher Albert Schweitzer called reverence for life, a deep respect for their own energy and attention that made them naturally protective of how they spent these resources. These high performers had learned to distinguish between motion and progress, between being busy and being effective, between working hard and working wisely. They understood that in a world that rewards busyness, the most radical act is sustained focus on what truly matters. But here's the secret that the productivity industry doesn't want you to know. This level of performance isn't sustainable through willpower alone. It requires what I call philosophical alignment, organizing your life around principles that are so compelling that following them feels natural rather than forced. What Elena discovered next revolutionized her understanding of productivity entirely. The most accomplished people she studied didn't maintain constant high intensity. They alternated between periods of deep engagement and complete recovery in natural rhythms that honored their biological and psychological needs. This challenges the cultural myth of the always-on high performer. In reality, sustainable extreme productivity requires what I call philosophical pacing, understanding that human consciousness operates in cycles, not as a constant output machine. The ancient concept of kairos versus chronos becomes crucial here. Chronos is clock time, measured, uniform, external. Kairos is the right time, the moment when conditions align for meaningful action. Most productivity systems are built around chronos, trying to force important work into arbitrary time slots. But extreme productivity requires sensitivity to kairos, the ability to recognize when your energy, focus, and circumstances align for breakthrough work. Elena learned to track her natural rhythms with the same precision she brought to her scientific research. She discovered that her mind was sharpest for analytical work in the morning, most creative in late afternoon, and best suited for routine tasks in the mid-afternoon energy dip that she'd previously tried to fight with caffeine. Instead of fighting these natural patterns, she designed her days around them. Her most important research happened during morning peak hours. Creative brainstorming and problem-solving moved to late afternoon. Administrative tasks got batched into the post-lunch period when her energy naturally dipped anyway. But the real breakthrough came when Elena realized that her weekly and monthly cycles were just as important as her daily ones. She discovered that she had periods of natural intensity when she could sustain deep work for weeks at a time, followed by periods when she needed to focus on maintenance tasks, relationship building, and integration. Here's an underground secret that contradicts everything our culture teaches about success. Extreme productivity requires the courage to do fewer things, not more. This isn't about efficiency. It's about what the philosopher William James called the art of being wise enough to know what to overlook. Elena's transformation accelerated when she embraced what I call conscious limitation. Instead of trying to optimize every area of her life simultaneously, she chose 3 domains for focused improvement and accepted good enough in everything else. This required philosophical maturity, the recognition that attempting to excel at everything leads to mediocrity in everything. Elena had to confront her own ego, which wanted to believe she could master every aspect of life if she just found the right system. The ancient Stoics understood this principle deeply. They taught that wisdom consists largely in knowing what deserves your attention and what doesn't. Epictetus divided all things into what is up to us and what is not up to us, focusing his energy entirely on the former. Elena applied this principle ruthlessly. She identified the 3 areas that would have the greatest impact on her research and personal fulfillment, then systematically reduced her involvement in everything else. This wasn't easy. It required saying no to opportunities that seemed important, disappointing people who expected her to maintain previous commitments, and accepting that some areas of her life would remain underdeveloped. But the results were transformative. By consciously limiting her focus, Elena discovered she could achieve far more in her chosen areas than she'd ever accomplished when trying to excel at everything. Let me share the first practical application of these underground principles. I call it energy archaeology, a systematic exploration of what actually gives you energy versus what depletes it. For 1 week, track not just what you do, but how different activities affect your energy levels. Rate your energy before and after each major activity on a scale from 1 to 10. But here's the crucial part. Distinguish between physical energy and what I call soul energy, that deeper sense of vitality that comes from meaningful engagement. Elena discovered that some physically demanding activities actually increased her soul energy, while some easy tasks left her feeling spiritually depleted. This insight allowed her to redesign her work around activities that energized rather than drained her essential self. The key is to look for patterns. What types of work consistently energize you? What kinds of interactions leave you feeling more alive? What environments support your natural productivity rhythms? This isn't about what you think should energize you, it's about what actually does. The second underground practice is meaning mapping, connecting your daily activities to your deeper sense of purpose in ways that make even routine tasks feel significant. This isn't about finding your life's purpose in some grand, abstract sense. It's about understanding how specific activities contribute to outcomes that matter to you. Elena discovered that data analysis, previously her least favorite part of research, became energizing when she could clearly see how it advanced her larger research goals. Start by identifying 3 outcomes that would genuinely matter to you 6 months from now. Then examine your current activities to see which ones contribute to these outcomes and which ones don't. You'll be surprised how many of your daily tasks have no connection to anything you actually care about. The third underground practice is philosophical filtering, developing clear criteria for what deserves your attention based on your deeper values rather than external pressures. Most people make decisions about how to spend their time based on what seems urgent, what other people expect, or what they think they should be doing. But extreme productivity requires philosophical clarity about what actually matters to you. Elena developed what she called her values filter, a set of questions she asked before committing to any new project or opportunity. Does this align with my core values? Does it utilize my unique strengths? Will it contribute to outcomes that matter to me 6 months from now? Does it energize or drain my essential self? If an opportunity didn't meet at least 3 of these criteria, she automatically declined it, regardless of how impressive it might look to others. This simple practice eliminated countless hours of work that would have kept her busy without making her productive. The 4th practice involves recognizing and honoring your natural productivity rhythms rather than fighting them. This goes beyond the typical advice about morning routines or time blocking. It's about understanding the deeper patterns of your energy and attention. Elena began treating her productivity like a natural ecosystem rather than a machine. She learned to recognize the signs that indicated when she was entering a period of natural intensity versus when she needed to focus on recovery and integration. During high-energy periods, she would structure her days around her most important work, minimizing meetings and administrative tasks. During lower energy periods, she would focus on relationship building, learning, and preparing for the next period of intense work. This rhythmic approach to productivity allowed Elena to sustain high performance over months and years rather than burning out after weeks of unsustainable effort. Here's the deepest underground secret. Extreme productivity isn't really about productivity at all, it's about consciousness. It's about developing such clarity about what matters to you that focusing on it becomes natural rather than forced. The productivity industry wants you to believe that the right system, the perfect app, or the optimal routine will solve your problems. But the truth is simpler and more profound. Productivity is an expression of philosophical clarity. When you know what you value and why you value it, when you understand your own energy patterns and honor them, when you can distinguish between what's essential and what's merely urgent, productivity becomes a natural expression of who you are rather than something you have to force yourself to do. Elena's transformation wasn't really about learning new techniques. It was about developing the philosophical clarity to see through the cultural myths about productivity and discover what actually worked for her unique consciousness. This brings us to a question that goes deeper than any productivity system. What would your life look like if you organized it around your authentic energy patterns rather than external expectations? What would become possible if you had the courage to focus only on what truly matters to you? The underground secrets of extreme productivity reveal that the most accomplished people aren't necessarily more disciplined or more intelligent, they're more aligned. They've developed the philosophical clarity to see through cultural conditioning and organize their lives around principles that actually serve their deepest goals. Most productivity advice treats symptoms rather than causes. It tries to help you do more of what you're already doing, faster and more efficiently. But the underground approach questions whether what you're doing is worth optimizing in the first place. Elena discovered that the question isn't, how can I be more productive? But, what deserves my productivity? Not, how can I do more? But, what's worth doing? Not, how can I be more efficient? But, how can I be more effective at what actually matters? You're at a choice point now. You can continue treating productivity as a mechanical problem, looking for better systems, apps, and techniques to help you do more of what you're already doing. Or you can recognize productivity as a philosophical problem, developing the clarity to focus your consciousness on what truly deserves it. The underground path requires more courage because it means disappointing people who expect you to remain busy with things that don't matter. It means having the philosophical sophistication to distinguish between motion and progress. It means developing the self-knowledge to work with your natural energy patterns rather than against them. But this path leads to something far more valuable than efficiency. It leads to effectiveness, meaning, and the deep satisfaction that comes from organizing your life around what you actually value rather than what you think you should value. The underground secrets of extreme productivity aren't really secrets at all. They're philosophical principles that anyone can apply. The question is whether you have the courage to examine your assumptions about what productivity actually means and the wisdom to organize your life around principles that serve your deepest aspirations rather than cultural expectations. Alina's story shows us that extreme productivity isn't about becoming a more efficient machine. It's about becoming more fully human. When you align your daily activities with your deepest values, when you honor your natural rhythms, when you focus on what's essential rather than what's urgent, productivity stops being something you have to force and becomes something that flows naturally from who you are. The choice is yours. Continue optimizing systems that may be pointing you in the wrong direction, or develop the philosophical clarity to ensure your productivity serves your actual life rather than someone else's definition of success. If you're ready to explore these deeper approaches to effectiveness and inner alignment, I invite you to subscribe for more insights that challenge conventional wisdom and point toward more authentic ways of living and working. True productivity isn't about doing more. It's about becoming more conscious of what deserves your precious attention and energy.